right, good night. Good night, good night, good night. Let's like, let's share, let's tag on tonight. Let's like, let's share, let's tag on tonight. Let's get as many people as we can in on because we are going to discuss something very important on tonight. So please do me a favor while you're coming in. Let's like, let's share, let's tag on tonight. Tonight's discussion is putting the puzzle together on our Can We Talk segment. So please, let's like, let's share, let's tag on tonight. This is going to be very informational. So please get your pad, get your paper going, and we are definitely going to ask those hard questions, and we're going to get rid of that stigma that is hanging over the head of a lot of people nowadays concerning mental health. So let's like, let's share, let's tag, let's start watch parties on tonight. Let's start as many watch parties as possible. Let's let's break the internet on tonight and let's get this ball rolling. I do believe that there is something that we all can learn from and that we can all get, do some great things with. So let's all get this ball rolling by liking and sharing and tagging. When you come in, don't be afraid to say hello. Y'all know how I am. I'm not the shame type. So please come on in and like and share and tag. Like, share, and tag, please, and thank you. Okay, so we are definitely going live on tonight, and we're definitely going to deal with this stigma concerning mental health on tonight. Y'all, and I have a guest on here for all of those who have come on and for those who have yet to come in, but you're looking from the outside, do me a favor, come on in, and when you come in, let's like, let's share, let's tag. I'm going to always throw this out there. You don't have to watch you don't have to watch any video on Facebook via your smartphones or your page. You can everybody has a Fire Stick. So download the Facebook Watch app and put in my name, FK Barnes Jr. And then this video will pop up and you can watch it on your TV. So you can sit on your TV, get you some popcorn, a notebook, your favorite glass of wine, your beer, whatever it is that you like drinking or eating. And let's sit down tonight. We're going to do something a little bit differently than what we normally do. I normally do a lot of teaching, but I've been feeling led in my spirit to talk about some mental illnesses, these things that have been going on that we have been leaving a deaf ear to. And I just believe that there are a lot of people who need this on tonight. I believe that there are some people who are going to share this, and I believe some people that are going to get on that are going to definitely need some of this information on tonight. This is some good information, and I have somebody who's well capable of being able to give us the tools that we need to be able to deal with what's going on. Y'all, he's a very funny person. So he may be serious on this live, but y'all believe me, he is definitely a very funny person. He has a great sense of humor. And the thing about his sense of humor is that in his sense of humor, he can still do what he can to be relative, and he can relate to you. So y'all sit back, y'all buckle up y'all seatbelts. I am bringing in a very good friend of mine by the name of Dr. Patrick Bortnick, who is the Dean of Social Work at Tulane University. Hey, Mr. Patrick, how are you doing on tonight?
How's it going? I heard about that. Yeah, I'll try to use humor tonight since we're talking about something serious because I think people often relate to humor when we're talking about serious subjects. And so I'm excited to be here and thank you for taking the time to do this and help us talk about stigma and things that we don't normally talk about.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things to really talk about is mental health, because the thing with mental health, when we think of mental health, people try to label people as being stupid or something. But when we look at mental health, if you would have to give mental health one word, what would you say mental health is in one word?
When I think of the word mental health, um, I think it's just trying to think of a word that I would use to describe it. It can mean many things to many people, but I think if people think of mental wellness, it's sort of wellness in spirit, wellness in mind, how you go about your day, and obviously, if I think of mental health, when I hear the word you said, well, what is one word with mental health? I immediately think kindness because that's what we need to show when we have people with varying differences. It's not that they're good or bad, they're just different than you and I. And being kind is always the best way to handle it. So when you said mental health, I immediately thought kindness. So
And it's ironic that you say that, because a lot of times when you think of people that deal with mental health issues, you kind of, there's this dark cloud of aggression that's surrounded when we think of mental health, because you see a person, and as soon as you see that they may have a mental state or something going on, you kind of you become very protective, or you become very aggressive towards that person, because you don't know exactly what it is that person may be carrying or may be dealing with. So I think that's a very good word of a good way of looking at it is the word kindness, because I don't believe nobody ever looked at it as of the word kindness. They just look at it in an aggressive tone. We see people. I was younger, and on the corner of um, Carrollton and I want to say Palmyra, there used to be a guy that was standing on the corner, and he used to always have a shower cap on his head and some other stuff. And he had mental issues, and my dad used to be a mailman in that area, and my father being a mailman in that area, he said one time he talked to the guy, and he said the guy had some sense. We've always stigmatized him as being crazy. He has sense. He just has had, or life has dealt him a bad hand. So let me ask this question: when could it be that it's not that people are really completely mental, it's just that life has dealt them a bad hand, so to the point that they don't know how to properly cope with what happened in life.
well, I think it's hard to sort of classify one situation or one individual. We often see people that are potentially homeless or living on the streets. There's trauma. There could be addiction issues. There could be that's their lifestyle choice. And I think what we often see is this stigma. So if you see someone on a street corner, somebody already says that person's bad or that person's no good just because they're not doing or living the same life we are. That we don't deal well with difference in our society at all. We try to label it, we try to come up with something. And yes, there is a lot of people that are living on the streets that have untreated mental health issues, and that came out of the deinstitutionalization years during the Reagan administration, where they shut down a lot of facilities that were providing treatment for people that had psychosis. Well, those folks then became on the streets, didn't have access to their medications or to the therapy and things they need. And that's where kind of a lot of things started. But I think it all starts with, you bring a good point, is what is the stigma, and I often try to share, personal things so people can kind of relate. Um, we look at 1 in 10 and 1 in 5. So one in 10 and 1 in 5 goes for, in the past month, any one to 5 people, 1 to 10 people have had a substance abuse or substance misuse issue, and 1 in 5 have had possibly a mental health issue. And so when you look at that, someone would look at maybe my family and say, oh, they're instinct to learn. And part of this is I do have permission by my daughter to share. I grew up in a family where my dad used every drug on the planet. I didn't know it when I grew up, when I was younger. And he was addicted to alcohol, drugs, you name it. I didn't know any different when I was a kid. It was just my father, although he was never around. So I was, sort of exposed to addiction. So again, when you're thinking one person in a family, right, there's one, right? And then when you look at my own family, my mother had panic disorder, which was an anxiety disorder, which caused her to be into some scary incidences that I witnessed as a child, thought she was dying because she was having panic. And then when I look at my immediate family, my youngest daughter, who I do have her permission, her name is Feng Hua, who actually have met her several times, and you love her, and you're like, oh, I love this kid and her spirit. Feng Hua has severe ADHD and has autism spectrum disorder. And she copes with this every day. And where I tell people is, when you look at my family, don't make assumptions, right? Because people say, oh, their family's fine, there's nothing wrong there. People don't often see things that are not physical. I remember, when we go to places and we'd be somewhere, and someone would see Feng Hua acting out. And whatever, that would be. She's a tall child. Control your child. What's wrong with her? They weren't sitting there going, I wonder what's going on with your daughter, that's differently. They had no idea. So the first thing was to chastise that you're being a bad parent or your child's being terrible. Now she's hearing this, and it's very interesting. If you look, and I were to say, my child has diabetes in a conversation to someone would be fine with it. Oh, then she's medication. Does she need this? If I tell someone, even to this day, that my daughter has autism, they sort of step back, like it's this panic thing, rather than saying, oh, wow. Or when they hear she takes 3 medications a day, they are like, well, why are you drugging your child? Well, this is a biological illness that it's no different than diabetes or any other illness. There are medicines to treat this. And I can say we have her conditions under control, where she goes to high school. She's been mainstreamed and she's getting great grades. Without pharmaceuticals to help her, she wouldn't be in that place, and she wouldn't be leading the life that she does. It's just different than yours and mine. It's not worse or better. She's just different, right? And that's okay. And until we as a society look at someone like Feng Hua or the person on the street and have compassion and caring and some humanity, we're never going to get past that, rather than labeling someone or thinking something's wrong with them, rather than saying, do they need help? Could we provide help? Are they untreated? Or just accepting some of the differences. That's a little bit a long way to get around it, but I always like to share a little bit of that, so people get an idea that not only do I teach, I talk about this stuff, I'm an advocate, but also it's part of my own life from growing up as a young child to even now.
So with that being said, and you kind of opened up about your daughter having
I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, you kind of went out. So let me ask this question: with you opening up about your daughter having autism, let me ask you this question. I'm more than sure that there are some parents on here that have some. Oh, look at my friend Frank. Wow, I looked at her. Oh my God.
Yeah, she actually, you could see her hand behind the minute I'm talking about her. She heard outside. I could hear someone walking. I said, "Come in." Do you know who that is, right? This is my daughter Feng Hua. She heard her being talked about, and so she wanted to come and say hi.
So question, since you opened that door and you brought about your daughter, a question with her having dealing with autism, has it been hard for her during this COVID season? And if you were to talk to any parent at this point that kind of have been dealing with the child that may have some issues with mental health or just possible whatever it is, what would you say or what advice would you give to that person that would kind of help them to be able to keep that child stable during this time? Because with all of these, all of this, the way this social distancing and all of these different regulations, I'm more than sure that children with ADHD, ADD, with all of these different mental issues, how do you keep that child stable during this time?
Yeah. How are you doing during COVID and the pandemic?
Fine.
Fine. How come?
Mm, it's like my regular summer.
You can speak up a little bit.
For the summer, it's like my regular summer, but during the school year, that was different.
It was different. Was it harder for you to figure out how to do some things?
Kind of.
Because it changed your routine, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't like you to go out a lot. How come?
Don't know.
Well, can I finish up here and you can go out there and play with the dogs? Thank you, sweetie, for sharing. Okay, you can close the door. So, what we often talk about is she has a lot of touch sensitivities, right, and things like that. She doesn't, we cut the tags out of her shirt. These things bother her, and that's somewhat of a common thing we see in children and adults with autism spectrum disorder. Anybody that has something going on pre-COVID, her school day, she'd go to school every day. She had a routine. She got up, she did the same thing. Now all of a sudden we shift literally overnight to where she's home all the time now. Well, she knows how to use computers, but even logging on and getting a different routine, we had to figure out how she turns in assignments, how she does it. So it was a change in her routine and what she did to try to pull that together. See, I love this Zoom stuff at home. You've got dogs, you've got kids walking on. It's just real, right? I love it. And so, hold on one sec. We'll see. We'll see if the dog will stop. But every time I'm talking, the dog will start. No, so I think that changing of a routine, I think as a parent, we worry about her going out in public. She also has had a severe heart condition as a child that's been repaired, and she's monitored every year. So something like COVID would not be a good thing for anybody, but someone that has some pre-existing medical conditions. So there's a concern as a parent, but it's more so related to she doesn't often think when she's out about not touching her face. Part of that's ADHD. So that's one of the main things, that we don't want to touch our eyes or our mouth or our nose, right? Because we've touched a surface that may have the virus on it. So that we worry about, because she always touches her face, or not keeping her mask on because it may be sensitive or she doesn't like to do it, or touching surfaces or picking things up off the ground. Those are things that all of us that don't think about it, we just don't, well, why would you do that? And so some of those things add on to our pressure. And then even getting treatment and things, right? She used to go see a therapist weekly and also getting medications. Well, all of a sudden in the middle of the pandemic, everything's shut down, right? If we run out of a medication, what do you do? And so I think there's accessibility issues, there's concerns. So I think a lot of parents out there, I just want to share, you got to have a sense of humor with this stuff, right? You got to realize that life's not always going to be the same, and it's going to be hard. It's not easy having to figure this out, but I think supporting your child or your a loved one or spouse or something like that, finding a way to support them and understanding they're experiencing all the same pressures and fears and things that we're experiencing right now with this pandemic, but they also have different ways of perceiving this as well. So they may have some added things on top of what we're experiencing. And so I think it's important to recognize it, not just sort of, oh, well, it's the pandemic, just get on with our lives. I mean, it's different. I mean, she has fears. I see when she goes out, she has even an overt fear of things. We were at the doctor's office and she had her hands in her pockets because she didn't want to touch anything at one point. So I think it's a sign of anxiety that I need to pick up on her sort of cue, showing me that and saying, well, that's okay. Keep your hands in your pocket. It's a great thing. It's okay. No one's going to think anything. So I think that's kind of important to talk about.
So I guess then this kind of leads me to my new question, because you said she kind of has, when she went to the doctor, she put her hands in her pocket. So let me ask this question. Outside of dealing with her, what do you think is the possible? What do you think stress looks like to people now? Because of all
It's a
of this
great.
social distancing and all of these other things that are going on, what does it look like now to people?
No, I think that's a great, that's just a great question. And I'm glad you asked that because there's a couple things that happen. Um, Everyone, we all expect ourselves to keep it together, right? And we're all going to be here. We're all going to be here. I'll share a little story about myself that when I tell it, people are like, what, you did that? You know? And so you know me and it won't surprise you, but other people are like, huh? So people, one thing that people always ask me is during an interview or something is like, why am I so tired all the time?
Yeah,
I said, well, think about it. I said, all of a sudden we get this pandemic hit. We've shifted our jobs to wherever they're at. People may have lost their income overnight, right? And not only are you dealing with how to figure out how you're going to manage your life or get income or get unemployment or whatever your situation may be, you have that added stressor. And now you add in the stress of this virus that we don't know much about. We still don't know a lot about it, and it's constantly on the news. Gloom and doom, gloom and doom, gloom and doom. I personally don't watch the news. I haven't in 10 years because it's not news anymore. It's all just, it's never any good stories, right? And there are good things, and we don't need negativity 24/7. So I talk to people about the grocery store. Whether you like going to the grocery store or not, right now I use the term as an old video game when I was growing up called Mortal Kombat, right? You go to the grocery store and it's like Mortal Kombat, right? You walk into there and you turn an aisle and you see someone and you see people jump back, right? That's not a normal reaction of us going to the grocery store. But during these times, it becomes a fight or flight situation. Is someone not wearing a mask? Is somebody not doing this or doing that? So that constant fear state, humans are not set up to be in constant heightened anxiety. We just biologically, behaviorally, mentally, we're just not meant to be there. So over time, you start to become run down and tired because you're always on, right? You never can be shut off because you're afraid if I don't do this, maybe I got the virus or did my mask fall off or did I forget my mask or something. So it's a constant state on top of an already situation that we've got that we don't know what's going to happen. Normally after a hurricane, I mean, obviously we're in the greatest city in the world, New Orleans, right? And so we know a hurricane comes through, bad things do happen, but the storm goes away, right? And then it's cleanup and doing that. With this pandemic, we can't tell what's going to happen in 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now. Will we get a vaccine? And I think that level adds another layer of stress and anxiety because we don't know what the future looks like. We know it's not the future or the past we had 6 months ago. So I think a lot of that is, and I think people should give themselves credit. And I tell people right now, you are going to feel stress, you are going to feel anxiety, but give yourselves credit just for getting up in the morning and brushing your teeth, taking a shower, and just getting up. Even if you don't do anything past that, consider that an accomplishment because that's even a hard thing to do right now. Just taking on another day that we don't know what's going to come of that. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's just kind of a thing to tell you what we should be feeling right now. It is completely within the realm to feel anxious, to feel stressed, to feel tired. I mean, it is. We're in a constant state of stress.
So let me ask this question. I actually read an article this morning, and it was about a lady who went into the Verizon store. This happened in California, right outside of, I think it was, I forgot the part of, it's right outside of Sacramento. And this lady went in the Verizon store. They asked her to put on the mask. She walked in the store without a mask. They asked her to put on a mask. She said no, she wasn't going to put on a mask. And then they said that she pulled down her pants and peed on the middle of the floor. So they called the police. And but then they found out that she had committed some other crimes. But then there have been some other stories, and there have been some videos surfacing of people going into stores and coughing on people or doing other things and not wanting to wear the mask. Do you believe that having to wear these masks and the way COVID is has created this stress and anxiety to where people are doing things outside of their norm?
I think a lot of these things that you're just, again, I don't know these specific incidents, but I could imagine that these individuals probably do things that are not within the realms of thing we all would do in situations, and the pandemic's probably not helping it. I think what's really become, and it all starts with leadership. And I do not do politics either, but I will tell you, when you get mixed messages and wearing a mask becomes about freedom or politics, that's where we've gone wrong, right? Nowhere in this country can you go into a restaurant or a store. We all seen the signs: no shirt, no shoes, no service. No one's running around saying, you're affecting my rights, I can do whatever I want. You know, you're not going to walk into a restaurant without a shirt on. It's just not acceptable. So why is it not acceptable that you're going in there and you have to wear a mask if that's what you do? Because it's become politicized. And I think people have turned this into some kind of, you know, leverage tool that we're infringing upon their rights. Well, they're not saying that if someone says you have to wear a shirt in a store or shoes, right? No one's yelling you're infringing. So I think part of this has become politicized, and then people aren't looking at science. At the end of the day, science has brought us to where we are, and it's going to get us out of these things. We know that masks work. They may be uncomfortable for people. However, I can tell you, being on a ventilator in a hospital with COVID is more uncomfortable than masks ever going to be to you. And hopefully no one ever has to get to that point. But wearing masks is one of the best preventions, in washing your hands. These are very simple things, but I think people aren't taking it as seriously as they should. And we're starting to see it across the country, that places where people haven't used masks, you're starting to see this uptick in cases very rapidly. And you know, I tell people I'm a runner, so I run with my daughters. Well, we had that big dust storm come into the city, and my throat was bothering me. So I wore a surgical mask and ran 3 miles in 90-degree humidity and 90-degree heat. Was it hard? Absolutely. I don't recommend it, but I didn't want to breathe in the dust from the dust storm. And I tell people, if I could wear a mask at 50-some-year-old running in 90-degree heat in the middle of New Orleans in the summer, you can wear one to a grocery store or a restaurant. It's not that uncomfortable. And so I think it's changing people's mindset. And, you know, even I has been doing the work that I've been doing for years. I was with Allison, my wife. We were in the store the other day, and everyone was wearing a mask. And I just look around, and it's even strange to me, because I'm saying everyone's wearing masks. This is just a weird world we're in right now. It's the right thing that we're supposed to be doing. But even I've seen a lot of things in my life. I'm going, this is bizarre. It is bizarre, but it's the thing that's going to save our lives, because we haven't normalized wearing a mask. And other countries have for years, for pollution and other things like that.
So with that being said, let me ask this question. How are people looking, how does stress look now that we're dealing with COVID? How does stress look?
I think stress manifests in different ways. I think sometimes people become short-tempered. Stress is usually out of fear, right? People don't get fearful, right? The person that you're saying you have to wear a mask, obviously that's triggering something. Well, you can't stop me. I can't do this. I can't do this. The idea of wearing a mask is not a problem, right? But they're fearful of something, whether it's being seen with the mask on, whether they feel they won't be able to breathe. Who knows? Some of it may be a political statement for all we know. But I think stress is different now, because we all have daily stressors in our lives. Life is stressful, right? However, when you add on the pandemic and these added levels of just doing daily activities, and I can tell you how many times I've left the house and I get driving and I'm halfway there and I don't have a mask. Well, after about 2 times, I was like, I can't believe this is, I'm like freaking out. I drive back home. So now I have a go bag in each one of the cars with 3 masks, 3 surgical masks just in case. But that's not something we would normally have to do. 4 or 5 months ago, we weren't having to do that. We weren't having to go in the grocery store, wipe down the carts, go into there, stay away from somebody, wearing a mask. What happens if I touch this piece of fruit? Do I, wash my groceries when I get home? Do I clean my shoes? Do I do this? All these things are added pieces on our already busy lives that just really adds to our sense of getting through the day. That's why I said literally, don't give yourself a break. If you get out of bed in the morning, you take a shower and you get up and you can smile. If you've done just that much right now with everything that's going on in this world, give yourself some credit. And it's things like that. Obviously, we all are doing other things. I think the idea is, stress is going to be there, anxiety is going to be there. And for people that are on the show tonight, if you're feeling a lot more stress than you normally feel, you start feeling depressed, all the time, you're starting to see things like that, reach out and call a crisis hotline. Or if you're feeling down and depressed for several days and you're low mood and you're not eating and you're losing sleep or you're fearful all the time, reach out to one of the helplines or call a treatment provider and get assessed, because these things could be symptoms leading to some more chronic stress conditions or depression, or folks that see that. And I will tell you what we do know, we've written several articles and we're doing several surveys right now that looking at, we know people that already have mental health or behavioral health conditions pre-COVID or pre-disasters. And also, I'll talk about addiction in a minute. We know that people tend to relapse and have their symptoms increase during high periods of stress. So a lot of people that had a pre-existing condition, it can become worse with a disaster situation. We saw this after the oil spill, the Gulf oil spill. We saw this after Katrina. Anytime these things happen. And the thing with addiction, people that are in recovery, we know there are huge relapse rates. I got one of the biggest reasons why people relapse is stress and anxiety, right? Well, that's everywhere right now, or even boredom, right? A lot of people are bored at home. And so these things, we know we're going to see increases on that. What concerns me is we have all people that didn't already have pre-existing mental health issues or addiction. We've got frontline responders, doctors, nurses, and social workers that are put under extreme stress, and I can talk about those groups in a minute. But even the general public right now, we're going to see increased rates of mental health conditions for now, for years to come, because COVID at some point, hopefully science will invent a vaccine. However, the stress and mental health and potentially traumatic stress that we've gone under, those conditions are going to far exceed the actual COVID situation. And that's what really concerns me, because we had a broken mental health system that had huge health disparities across the board. And with all the new cases and issues we're going to see, communities didn't have a great system before. We're going to still have a ton of people that don't have the resources or can provide assessment and treatment for folks that truly need it.
So I think we had this earlier. So let me get back off it. Do you feel like who may have been dealing with substance abuse before the pandemic, be it drugs or alcohol or whatever their coping mechanism was, now that they're forced to be inside, do you feel like some people are going through withdrawals, or do you think they've increased their dosage of whatever it was they were using?
It's hard to give a general sense. The things that we do know is, because we're still trying to figure out the data right now, but looking at previous disaster situations, we know somebody that had usually people that are in recovery, or those that maybe are kind of in and out of recovery, there are huge increases in relapse post-event. The problem is we don't have a post-event right now. We're still in the pandemic, and who knows how much longer we're going to be doing this, right? Who knows if this is the first wave still, is this the second wave? So that stress is going to increase. Well, stress is never good for anyone with any of us. However, someone that has a mental health condition or addiction, that's a huge trigger for relapse or potential increased use. And you're seeing a lot of things pop up with doing online remote sessions, or even NA or AA groups are doing these remote things to provide some sort of support. And it's working, but it's still not having that direct connection with somebody that you would have going to a group meeting out there.
So let me, since you talked about addiction, and I read some of your bio, and I've even caught one of your TED Talks. And in your bio, it talks about you're actually the developer of a virtual reality software or something that helps people with addictions and stress. Do you think right now that may be something that probably in the near future is going to be something that can help people with this stress and anxiety that they they have developed even more now that they're not as busy as they were. Because I realized that when people are busy, they tend not to deal with the problems, or as we said earlier, sweep it under the rug. But now that you're in your house for 4 months, those things that were sitting under your rug have now seeped from under your rug, and now you're forced to deal with it. So, do you see that something like that would be something that's going to be needed in this moving forward? Because also, with all of this getting ready to happen, we know we're dealing with stress, but also we have to look at the moving and shifting of how the world is changing. Everything is starting to kind of convert to that AI and more computer-based things. So, do you believe, like, when it comes to now stress and all of that, because now we even have to see our doctors via our phone?
Yeah, I think
Something that's going to help us with this stress and anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things we do with virtual reality is we have mindfulness and meditation. It's guided meditation. So with virtual reality, you literally put the headset on, and you're immersed in outer space or in a forest or in a winter scene, and you're guided through a medication. Sorry, that's a slip of the tongue. Guided through a meditation exercise. And doing that, and it helps you to relax. And what people don't realize is, anybody that's out there listening, is anyone actually taken time out of their day to take care of themselves, indulge themselves in something they love to do, watch, listen to their favorite song, just to tune out, just to give yourself a mental break. I don't care if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Most of us don't have an hour usually that we can spare, especially if you're taking care of somebody else, you have kids, you have work, or whatever you're trying to do. But when's the last time someone's taken 10 minutes and just deep breathed, or said, you know what, I'm going to listen to these 5 songs and just close my eyes and listen to this music, or I'm going to pick up a book, because we need to be able to tune out, to just refresh ourselves, right? And to give our chance a mental break during the day. And what virtual reality can do, the headsets now are like $200-300, and the app's like $10. You put it in, and you literally can be sitting in this thing. I use it in my office during like every other day in my office. I'll put it on for 10 minutes, and I'll just go into a virtual room and just sit in there and listen to the ocean or watch the planets or something. And it grounds me a little bit, but it takes dedication to do it. And I think when people need to realize they need to take that mental break, it's not only good for their mind, but it's also good for their body, and also helps feed their soul, right? And really kind of instills a sense of balance. Because right now we're on 24/7, right? We're thinking about this. We're thinking about this. We're worried about COVID. I think so. One of the folks on the live comments on here said, I've not taken time for myself. Yes, I mean, as a caregiver or an individual, we often ignore our own needs. And it's very important for you to be there for yourself, but also to be there for others. If you're not whole, or you're not taking care of yourselves, you're not going to be able to take care of others. And one thing I talked about, the first responders and the frontline responders, we started to see early on that the frontline responders were put under increasing amounts of stress. And most people know and think, and they've seen things, pick stories and things online. But right when you normally go into a hospital and get an operation, right, the doctors, nurses, they have masks on when they're performing surgery, right? And then when you go back to your room, they come in and see you. They're not masked, they're not gloved, unless they may do another procedure. Right now, doctors and nurses are having to wear masks their whole shifts, because every place is a potential place to pick up the virus or transfer, have something happen in there. So now you're wearing a mask. So this is something you don't normally do. You're now having to have relatives of someone who's really sick, possibly dying. You're now been put in the situation of going between a grieving family who cannot be there with their loved one when they die, and the patient. So now you're put under that added stress, and you're seeing people die. And there was a lack of PPE, the masks and things for our first responders. So you have that added stress. So your job that you normally deal with and deal with it well, now you've had all these other layers of stress. that it's not okay. So you're starting to see that. And I will tell you, all of the first responders that I've spoke to, talking about, well, how are you doing this? And wholeheartedly, they did not worry about themselves. They said, I need to be there for my patients. I need to make sure my team's safe. I mean, these are the most beautiful people you could ever want to be around. And so hearing that, I said, we've got to develop some kind of self-care resources that they can access to give them that nurturing and self-care that they need for their day. So we started, like, literally within 5 days, our communications director at the school and myself, I hatched this plan, said, let's build a self-care website, because I searched online, and if you type in self-care, you will get pages and pages of stuff. I'll be honest, it's anxiety provoking. What's good? What's there? So I worked with an expert in mindfulness, Stephanie Osborne, here in New Orleans, and asked her to create 5 9 to 15 minute meditation, self-care, mindfulness video. There's a sound bath. Stephanie's really well known, and she did these videos for us that I'll show you the website here in a few minutes. And literally they're 9 to 15 minutes. And I challenge anyone to say, if you can't take 9 to 15 minutes to get yourself some self-care, that's the challenge. You have to do it. You have to take care of yourself. So we made them that small. So doctors, nurses, social workers could literally, in between patients, practice mindfulness each day, or after a shift or doing stuff. You can access it on your cell phone. Just that little bit is something that you could really do to help ground yourself and to restore your balance back, just to do something that's nurturing for yourself.
So you got have a resource that you use during this time. I would be remiss not to ask, could you please share that resource with us? Because I believe there are some people that are probably sitting there and they're like, I need this resource. I'm more than sure they probably typed in self-care and have looked for it as many times as possible and realized that they couldn't find it. So could you share with us what it is that you have that we could possibly use that's not just interface friendly? Because can it be used on like your pads and your phones, or is it just computer based?
Yep, let's see if it's I'm trying to share it to see how we do this. It's saying your browser has blocked your screen. Click the screen icon in your address bar to allow access.
And you may have to allow the access because some browsers block things.
Let's see, we were doing this earlier.
Okay, give him a moment. He's going to come back in because he just actually, okay, he's back.
Did it work? Let's see if we'll try it again.
Try it again.
Oh, here we go. This may work. Let's see. Oh, that's us. Okay, here we go. So are you seeing the website, the web page?
Here we go. Yep. I'm ready to bring it.
So the goal with this web resource was to create, literally within 2 to 3 clicks, you could be practicing some type of self-care. And there should be something on here for everybody to access. Also very important, up in the top corners, in case you are potentially, there's the suicide helpline, there's the disaster crisis mental health line. These are manned and staffed 24/7 for you to call just in case, because you never know. Somebody may be looking up this and may be in crisis. This way they can be connected live with resources rather quickly. But what we tried to do, so you click on the site and the videos that I described, you have one click here, and within 2 clicks, you can be practicing a mindfulness session. They're 13 minutes, here's 9.5 minutes, and they're all different. They help you, and Stephanie guides you through all of these, which is great. There's even some mindfulness videos that are in Spanish that there's a link to access. So that's one of the pages when we look at to meditate. Get moving. Another thing is people getting outdoors, doing something. So if mindfulness or meditation's not your thing, you could go out and do exercise. One of the things I do is I go running with my daughters outside. It's part of what we do for exercise, but it also clears my head when I run. But this is, you click here, and with this website, you just put in your zip code, wherever you're at around the world, And this brings up walking, running trails everywhere with a map and tells you how to get there and list them all out, how far they are. So it's an immediate resource. And you're noticing on here, there's nothing about, there's no ads popping up or anything. These are all been curated. So there's not people selling you things. Here's a free yoga app you can download. The other thing is important. So you think about meditate, get moving, and also connect with people. So we built this out and keep adding resources. So this tells you, this is a, if anyone's done a Zoom happy hour, everyone that I talk to is like, oh, wow, we hate that, right? Because it gets weird, right? A bunch of people sitting on a Zoom. Well, here's a game you can add that one of our faculty started playing with their friends, and they were on Zoom for 3 hours, and it was like they were playing a trivia game in a nightclub. And so it really allowed you to take the technology. There's things we have on here for kids. There's a gratitude toolkit, something that, practicing gratitude. You can download this, and this teaches you how to be thankful and address gratitude for yourself. So there's all types of pieces on here, and even things for kids. You can work with kids, giant list of things to do. So if you have kids, you can come on here. Searchable activities. You can create your own virtual reality tour. I'm sure you're going to do this yourself. Once you see this, you're going to go into here. Tour national parks, virtual field trips. So parents and kids, or kids could get on here and literally take that mental break from the stress of the day. One of my favorite links on here is the indulge section. So we wanted people to hear from artists and musicians and people out there of what they're doing during the pandemic for self-care and taking care of it. So Terrence Osborne, those of you that don't know Terrence, he's a phenomenal artist and a good friend. And he painted the picture of the nurse for, it's called Frontline, to honor the frontline heroes. And this is it. And this is like a 4-minute video that he talks about why he paints, how he relaxes, how we should all look at it. And he actually paints, and it's very relaxing watching him paint. Here's some virtual reality artists. Derek Tabb from Roots of Music and Rebirth Brass Band. He talks about how he mixes music. Most people know him as a percussionist, so that's on there. These are medical clowns. They sing a little song about being happy and all of that during add some whimsy for kids and families. Poppy Tooker, well-known celebrity cook here, teaches us. She takes 10 minutes out. Is one of the most beautiful videos. She shows us how to make her famous roux. And so we have all different types of things on here for people to see and connect with. But here are virtual museums. So if your thing's art, all these are online virtual museum. There's over 2,000. You click on here and you can be in an art gallery. So if that's what allows you to relax, you can be in there doing that, going into an art gallery. Bandstream Live, these are concerts. That are artists, local artists are playing bands, live shows that are coming up that you can log into and support artists. WWOZ, the greatest station in the world here in New Orleans. These are all the daily calendar in New Orleans, and anyone can go in here. These are all folks that are on here doing live performances. So there's a little something for everybody as you go through. NPR, American Roots. Here's a digital library. We wanted to make things accessible. So here is, you can stream free movies with a library card. So maybe you don't have cable or you just don't want to deal with Netflix or anything. You can stream movies here. But again, there's all types of things. Botanical gardens, you can see famous landmarks. Here's activities for parents and kids where I kind of went to earlier. But there's a little bit of something for everything. Here's coloring activities for kids where you can download different types of coloring books from various museums across the country. So we really wanted to make this a collection of resources that's ever changing for parents, kids, and those that have kids out there. This is something that we really wanted to talk about. There's a movie from down at the bottom for parents and teachers and caregivers resources, because we all may be in these positions. This talks about for parents and kids, how do you talk about with your kids about the pandemic and stress? We added this, trying to find the link for, where is it? More activities just for kids. I'm trying to find the one for, let me go back here real quick. We've added so much stuff, it keeps going. For kids, I think this is on here. Nope, I don't see it. Oh, so the movie Inside Out, the Pixar movie Inside Out, we worked with the National Mental Health Innovation Center, and they had us join with them. This is a parent viewing guide for the movie Inside Out, and it literally goes scene by scene and creates moments for the parent and child to connect, talking about emotions and different feelings that the characters are showing. And you can, there's questions to ask your kids. Which of Riley's emotions do you have? What is your behavior like when you feel this way? So it's a way to connect your kids so they understand their emotions. And it's a good talking point. If they're saying, I feel scared, I feel angry right now, it really gives you a talking point within parts of the movie to really talk with your child about emotions that they should be having right now. So this is just, I just wanted to share this with the listeners out there. This is totally accessible to anyone out there. It is free. The only thing we want you to do is to use it. And it's for families, kids, frontline responders, anybody you think could use this. Please share the link. It's designed to get people going. And the best compliment I received, and I think if this is everything that we've done with this website, someone called me and said, we had a death in our family and I was feeling really down and everything. And they said, I clicked on that link and went on the website and it made me feel a little bit better. And I'm like, then we've succeeded, right? If we've helped one person, we've done our job. It was worth all the effort that we keep putting into this. So that's just kind of tells you a little bit about that. But that gives you some ideas.
Okay, so when you get a chance, please put that link in the box for the people. And you said something, and you kind of pricked something. You said that someone had lost a family member during this pandemic. So with that being said, can I ask a question? How do people cope with grief during this time? Because I know that that's definitely one of the things that right now is definitely going on, and I believe people need some tools or just some type of help to grieve. Because I had a friend who lost their mother, and it was kind of hard to kind of give that person some type of relief, because during this time there's so much distance going on that it's hard to kind of give somebody some words of encouragement. So how do you deal with grief in this time?
I think grief comes in many forms right now. New Orleans, we know about our festivals and things like that. So we'll talk about standard grief with someone passing away. We're all in a sense of grief just about our daily lives, right? Our lives have changed. They're not what they were 4 months ago. So, graduation that we would normally see for people, or events that we would normally go to, or using Uber or Lyft, right? Going around the city. You couldn't do that, or going out to eat. We are grieving a lot of these things because they're things that we enjoy doing and they've been taken away from us, and we don't have someone to blame, right? You can't just say, oh, the hurricane, the damn hurricane, right? You can say the pandemic, but it's this amorphous thing, right? There's no way to put your hand on this thing. And so people, all of us are feeling grief. And now put that on top of losing a loved one during this time. I always tell people in New Orleans, we celebrate life, but we also celebrate death. It's very common to have a second line or a party or get a band together when somebody dies, and we do a procession. That is how we celebrate that person's life. That all has been ripped away from us because for health and safety reasons, which is the right thing we need to do. However, what are we doing to help people cope with grief and loss right now when we don't have the things that we would normally do? You have tons of people, and also add that on top of a loved one. Some people are not able to be there when their loved one passes in the hospital because of containment and what they need to do. So they may not be able to be there. I told someone one of the most beautiful things I've seen is when somebody's passing and their loved ones are there with them, right? That is, just, there's a beautiful thing there. You're all together. People are not able to do that. And that is a very humane, basic thing that we do, and that love, and there's a connection. When you aren't able to do that, it's hard to explain to people. How do you help them grieve? How do you support them? And I think a couple things we do. We can't change the situation that we're in right now. I think be there for the person, right? Reach out to people, let them know you're there, let them know you're thinking and caring about them. I tell people one thing people need right now is for someone to reach out. And usually every couple days, I'll call someone on my address book that I maybe not have heard from in a while, or I'll text someone and just say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm thinking about you." I'm doing that because it's nurturing my soul, but it's also making a connection with someone because they need connection right now. So I think when you lose, and families that have lost multiple family members due to COVID right now, it is unfair, it is unjust, it is a disease and something that's come into the world. And how do you process that and not being able to go to a funeral home or having a funeral that normally has a bunch of people there? So not only are you grieving the way you've lost how we grieve, but you also can't get that sense of closure, right? And how do we get that sense of closure? So I think acknowledging it like you're doing and talking about it like this, that acknowledge, yes, this is a huge sense of loss. This is terrible, right? That we can't grieve our loved ones like we should. And every culture does differently. New Orleans, we have a second line. We have a party. We celebrate. That's what we do, right? And not being able to do that is very hard. How do you put that together? I don't have a great answer, but I can tell you being there for other people, connecting with them, and just hearing them and talking with them and reaching out. And they may need just a vent. They may tell you that it just sucks. This is horrible. I can't bury my mother, my father, my child the way I would normally like to do it. And they may just need to grieve that way and just vent and just, I think, listening and letting people know. We also are huggers in New Orleans, right? People can't hug. You see people like, what do you, I saw a friend of mine the other day and he came to drop something off and he was across the fence and we both went like this. And then we're like, and we were just so bummed out, right? But that's what we do in New Orleans. And so it's another piece of our lives that we've lost that's very near and dear to us. And you compound it with all these things. So we're grieving normally with just the losses in our lives. But then when you have a relative or a friend pass, it adds even more onto that. And so I think to acknowledge your feelings, to talk about them with people, if you're grieving and it's going on for a while, go reach out to a crisis line or talk to a therapist or go see a counselor. That's needed, especially now.
Yeah, and it's crazy because when you say, like right before you said no closure, one of the commenters, Amanda Atkins, actually said that people aren't getting closure. But Karen Waters said something, and she said sick people are afraid to be alone at hospitals, so they don't go. Um, how do we deal with that as family members? Because I think that's an anxiety as a family member we have, knowing that we have a family member that may be sick. And a couple of the underlying people or things that they have been said with or who are at higher risk for COVID are people with diabetes, high blood pressure, heart things going on in their heart. So as family members having to deal with that anxiety of having a family member who may be sick, and though it's not COVID, they're afraid to go to the hospital with COVID. How do we lower our anxiety so that we maybe can give them some type of hope to maybe even go into the hospital and not be afraid?
Well, I think you're always going to be afraid, and I'll share something with myself, right? Like I'm clinically licensed, right? But I often share my real feelings. One of my biggest fears is one of my kids not getting COVID, but getting COVID where they would have to be hospitalized and they would be alone. I've cried about it, thinking about it. I've had a nightmare about it that I couldn't be there with my child in the hospital. I don't know how I wouldn't know how to cope, right? And so that is a fear that I have, that I couldn't be there, or my wife, right? I couldn't be there at a time when she needs me most, right? I would be angry, I would be frustrated, I wouldn't know how to do it. So I'm telling you, that's a fear that I have. So I think that's something that we all have, because we want to be there, especially at a time of need, whether it's a child, whether it's a parent, it doesn't matter. And that is a fear we all have, And as we're seeing these things going, and the doctors and nurses are doing, and now when I talked about frontline responders, they're now seeing and witnessing this. So not only are they doing their jobs, think about the stress they're under when they're seeing family members that they know need to be in there with their loved one, but for health and safety reasons, they just can't because it's a potential dangerous situation to the family members as well. And so I think Amanda, was it Karen talked about people are afraid so they don't go to the hospital. I think you mentioned it too. Yeah, I think people are fearful to go into the hospital now, and how to seek treatment and what to do that. I think at the end of the day, you're going to make the right decision. If your relative needs to be hospitalized, that's what you need to do, even though, you're going to be dealing with your own fear and anxiety. But understand, you're going to be fearful. You're going to be anxious because we don't know enough about this virus. We don't know what it's going to do to a young person, what it's going to do to an old person, because it's changing every single day. We know if you had, they're talking about previous health conditions, this virus can be pretty devastating. And now we're starting to see things on the back end of people having other symptoms after they've gotten out of the hospital. So I think there's fear of all of that. It's an enemy we can't see. We can see the molecules, we can do this, but that doesn't help us. We don't know what's going to happen. And so I think what people need to sort of do is acknowledge these fears, talk about them. When I had that fear about our daughters, I went in and talked to my wife and cried. I said, I'm scared to death right now that one of our girls is going to get sick and they're going to go to the hospital and be alone. And we hugged and she said, I'm scared to death as well about that too. But if it happens, we will figure it out and we will do whatever is best for them. But I think it's talking about it and acknowledging and getting a friend or someone that you can have these talks with, or a therapist or a clinician or a counselor. You need to just talk about these feelings and don't be afraid and be stigmatized. I think now is the time to be vulnerable. And that's why I often share my story with people, because I hope that models behavior for others, that if I'm here willing to share my life and things that have gone on in my life, that other people will go, oh, wow, I looked at him as the dean of social work and he's this and he's that. And he's going through a lot of these same things and he's willing to talk about it. And that's why I brought Feng Hua in here. She's willing to talk about her journey with autism so other people can see and hear that it's okay. And I'll share the story that I talked about earlier. So I remember about 2 months ago, I got up. It was a Saturday morning. It was a beautiful spring morning in New Orleans. And I had a cup of coffee and I walk out on the porch and I'm like, oh, I'm just jazzed. I'm like, this is a great day. And then I look across the street and I see two of my neighbors standing apart. All of a sudden, wham, COVID. It's the pandemic. I had forgotten all about it. I'm enjoying a beautiful sunny day. I set my coffee down calmly. I went into the house, into the bedroom, closed the door, and just let out a scream. I wasn't mad at anything in particular. I was sad that I had this great feeling and moment of just enjoying a cool spring day in New Orleans. And here we are in this pandemic. And it just felt good to just let it out, right? My wife comes in and goes, what are you screaming about? Did you fall, right? So it was kind of funny about that. But, I just said, I just needed to scream. And people know me. They go like, you scream? I'm like, I don't know. It was just something I did. But I gave myself permission to feel in that moment and to be vulnerable rather than just saying, oh, yeah, it's the pandemic. Let's get on with life. You need to feel. You need to talk with others.
So with all of that going on, would you say that COVID has opened up our eyes to see burnout, see that some of us are actually burnt out with, I guess, life and some things that's going on and having to deal with reality?
Yeah, I think this pandemic has affected everyone, right? We're not seeing it just it's all over the place. And I think a lot of people are questioning life choices. I think a lot of people are questioning what matters in this world. One of the things that I've seen come out of this pandemic is very interesting, right? Most people had no ideas across this country who their neighbors were. New Orleans were a little bit different. We tend to know our neighbors, but not always. I can tell you, people are outside. People are sitting on their porches. They're walking their dogs. I've met probably more people and have developed friendships with people that I'm having to be physically distanced from, but we've got great relationships. So I think it's making those physical connections with other humans that in going out there. So that's one thing. It's kind of brought us together as a community because we're all fighting the same thing here. We're kind of in this together. It's not us against them or them against this. We're all fighting this sort of common thing that we can't see, but we're all in it together, and realizing what I may be going through is the same thing you're going through. And we're all grieving things that we've lost. We're grieving things that probably we didn't even care about, right? Things that I don't even like, right? I'm grieving them for some reason. Why? Because it's a change. And I think there's some good things that came out of here, but I think acknowledging and talking about our lives and what we do, but you got to make connections with people. My oldest daughter we were at dinner the other night, and we all have a sense of humor. Mine's the most twisted, but she goes, "Baba," and I said, "What?" And she goes, "This pandemic has been an introvert's dream," right? And she just kind of laughs, right?
It's funny that you say that, because outside of myself, and you don't know that side of me, well, you might know a little bit of that side of me, but people that know me know that I'm an introvert. So, like, I love the fact that like, when we were in phase one, like the beginning of phase one, and I was at, like, there was nobody out. I could go in the store and you didn't have to worry about people. Like, and I can even be transparent. Like, going into malls pre-pandemic, I had slight anxieties because, I'm always looking around. You don't know what's going to happen in these malls. Then people are crazy. So, she was not lying. Anybody that's an introvert, I'm more than sure they'll tell you, like, and I have some friends, and we've laughed about it, like me and my other introvert friends, like, we love the fact that nobody was out and about, like everybody was secluded. But it's funny. Let me ask this, because even being an introvert, do you feel like people that are introverts are silently dealing with stress and depression during this quarantine? Because now, even, a lot of us introverts live in our heads. So do you think a lot of introverts have silently been going through stress and depression now, because not only are they closed in, and not only are they not dealing with, because even being an introvert, you still have that small social interaction. But now that you're not having that one-on-one interaction, do you feel like some people, introvert and extrovert, have been going kind of crazy?
Well, I think, it's flipped your lives, right? Think if you're an extrovert right now. If you're used to being out there and hanging around people and being the life of the party, what party are you being the life of right now? It's sort of ironic that this may seem like an introvert's dream, but the person who's introverted will be grieving some of that connections, because you're saying you do have these connections that are with the group of friends you have. You're not getting those right now. So some of the things you're saying, not being out, going to the store, being a homebody, or whatever, how it takes with your life, that may be great right now. But think about when the pandemic's over. Now you have to go back. So you're going to grieve probably that you can't be in the house all day. So it's just a change for everybody if you're an extrovert. And that's why I say this thing has been an amazing thing across anyone. No one has been spared from the situations. It doesn't matter, introvert, extrovert, whatever. It's of impacting your life, and not in good ways. It may seem like a good way, and I had to correct my daughter and say, well, you do have to go out into the world and go to college and go in the workplace. You can't just live in the house forever. And she goes, yeah, I know that, but this still is kind of nice being alone. Yeah, and she's looking at a little bit of a positive thing here, right? So I think that's where you try to find little positive things during your day, because I will tell you, the amount of negative stuff that you see in the day. I literally tell people, do not watch the news. It is probably one of the most mentally stressing things you can see. Rarely do they have a good thing showing, hey, there's going to be a show on tonight where they're going to frankly talk about mental health issues and reduce stigma and this and that. You don't see that. You hear this person died. COVID's all over the place. The government did this. There's killing. There's not one good, even the weather. I stopped watching and this is this is my humor part. I stopped watching the news years ago when I remember the weather came on. It was a beautiful sunny day, and that wasn't good to talk about. They said this is an extreme, and the person got real like, this is an extreme ultraviolet event. You shouldn't go outside. I'm like, it's a sunny day, all right. That's a little, but that was it. And I'm done. And I haven't watched the news in years. Every once in a while, I'll read a story here or there just to kind of refresh myself, so I'm not totally. But I don't watch the news because look at the COVID. CNN has become basically the COVID anxiety stirrer upper. Every 5 minutes, there's a map of people dying. There's a map of this. What good is that doing for you? Nothing. Go practice some self-care. Take that same time that you're doing that. Go watch some trashy TV that you haven't done. Give yourself permission to feed your soul, to give yourself permission to not be constantly worried or this or that. Take care of yourself, because if you're not, it's going to start to have more and more of an impact on you.
Yeah. Amanda Atkins said, I'm an introvert and I'm going crazy. She's like, but I walk a mile a day and dance in my living room every other day. So even though she's going crazy, it seems like she's doing some self-care things to kind of help her cope with what's going on.
Yeah, I think Amanda hits up. Yeah, that's what we were talking about, extroverts, right? Like, yeah. What are they doing, right? What is their sort of? But I think it's right. What people are kind of saying on here is, and I want you to give permission to go. And everybody that's on the show or watches this video, you need to commit to taking. And I'm going to do. It's little steps. Take 10 minutes out of your day to practice some self-care. I don't care if it's something on the website that we show you. It doesn't have to be meditating. Doodle on a page. Draw a cartoon character. Listen to your favorite song that you haven't listened to in 10 years because you forgot about. The other day I found myself listening to Manfred Mann and bands from like the 70s and 80s, and I haven't done that in years. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do some things that I haven't done just to change it up a bit. And it felt good, right? I was reminiscing about things, stuff like that. But start off with giving yourself 10 minutes. And no one on this show or anywhere else can tell me you can't take 10 minutes out of your day to do something for yourself and nurture your cognitive, your mental health, and yourself. You have to do it.
And it's crazy that you said that, and we were talking about the self-care, and it brought me back about 3 years ago when I was going through some traumatic issues. I had lost my wife, and of course, I was going through a divorce at the time. And I was counseling with who's going to be one of our guests next week, Dr. Deidre Hayes, and that was one of the things that she said. She said in the grieving period, you have to take some time out of yourself and kind of get away and just kind of and find something that makes you happy. So one of the things she told me, I told her, like, I found myself going in the store and just looking around and walking around, and I would buy something. So she said, okay, your self-care thing is when you go in the store, buy yourself something. So anybody that knows me, and I think you know me well enough to know, I have this huge sock bench. Like I have like 4 drawers full of socks, and I have like 2 of them of unopened socks that I have not worn yet, and I still go buy more socks. And it's crazy because I still use that tip now. So I find myself when I go in stores, I still buy socks because that was something that I used that self-care, and it helped me to deal with or cope with where I was. So what would you say would be some good, and I don't want to say coping mechanisms, but what would be some good things that are good tools that we can use during this time of pandemic? Because even though they're opening up the cities, there's a strong appeal to getting ready to shut back down. So in the event that they do shut down, what are some things that we could possibly do to help us with self-care, even though we may likely deal with stress and anxieties during that time?
Yeah, I think it's again, you have to commit to doing something every day, and it should not be, self-care should not be a job. It should, like, one thing I did is I kind of got off Facebook for a while because I was watching it in the middle of the pandemic, and all of a sudden they were renovating their house, and they were doing this thing. I'm like, this is not self-care. This is work, right? I know you're home, but you don't have to renovate the bathroom. And then they're showing, I felt like something was like, I was a terrible person. Why am I not renovating the house in this? I'm like, what? Right? I just see somebody was baking a cake in the shape of something. I'm like, huh? Right? So I said, that's not self-care. Self-care has to be something that you do to take care of yourself. It's not work. It should be that break that you give yourself. So I think one thing that a lot of people are doing right now is cooking. And I don't know if those that listen to the show know you're a phenomenal cook, and you always show what you're eating and the things you make, and you create these healthy dishes. So that could be a thing of self-care for someone. Try a recipe that you haven't tried. If you have someone you can cook with, share it together, cooking that, having a meal. I tell people, art, if you haven't done art in a while or something, you're like, oh, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. Start with 10 minutes, right? And just make it something that you want to do, and nurture your soul, whether it's listening to music, whether it's meditating. You can start, I'm going to keep throwing it back. Start, if you could listen to one of the mindfulness videos for Stephanie Osborne that we have on the site. They're 9 to 15 minutes. If you start doing that every day or every other day, you take that break, then you can say, hey, I really like mindfulness. Or you know what? I'm now set aside 10 minutes of my day. Why don't a mindfulness is good. Why don't I get in, maybe taking a 10-minute walk around to say hi to some neighbors as I'm walking the neighborhood. Well, I have a mask on or whatever. Why don't I call up a friend that I haven't talked to in 10 years and just reconnect with them? Because I'm sure they need it as much as I do. So you need to really consciously take the time to sort of nurture your mind, body, and soul, and you will feel better, and also reach out to someone if you're not feeling well. Don't be afraid to seek help. Be vulnerable and to connect with people.
I'm enjoying this talk. I think I needed this a whole lot more than a lot of other people. I've been reading through it, but it definitely helps, because even during the pandemic, I've been working, so I've been out there on that front line dealing with people. There were some things that we had to take. So, with this being, we getting ready to close out. This being one of our last questions, in this transitional period. Whether we don't know whether they're getting ready to shut down or whether they're getting ready to, get these kids ready for school. What are some things that parents could possibly do, or even not parents, because there's probably some young people looking, that will kind of ease their minds as they prepare to move forward into this next phase of whatever life is going to be?
I think you need to acknowledge, what are parents doing right now? Again, it's hard to put something together because we're all going through it. So is school going to start? Is it not? Are the kids online? Are they offline? Are we going to work? Are we not? I mean, it's this constant stop and start, and no one has the answer, because we don't know enough about things right now to actually have an answer, right? So I think the one thing that I tell people about is you need to be flexible, right? I mean, that's going to be the key to this, is being flexible, and sort of going with the flow a little bit. And when people ask me, I don't even know what the flow is right now, because I can't even tell you what's going to happen, right? Our daughter's school in New Orleans Public Schools, delayed start, right? All of a sudden we hear they're delaying start. Well, that kind of came out of the blue. So all of a sudden parents are here. Here's another challenge. We're just starting to get back to work, and now the kids may be home. Or what people often forget about is it's not just young kids. What happens if you have an adult parent that's in adult daycare, and now that's not going to be open? So, you need to think about, how we're planning for our lives, but it's hard to make a plan right now because we don't know what the plan's going to be, right? We could go back to phase 0 in another week. We could be in phase, I don't even know what the phases are anymore. I think they just start making up new ones as we go here. We're phase 2.1.5 or something. But again, it's that moving target. I still think the same thing is talk to your family members about it. And if you need to say this stinks or this sucks and saying, I'm just so tired of all this changing, that's sharing your feelings and being vulnerable. I'm quite frankly sick of the ever-changing thing myself, right? And I help people deal and cope with situations. And I'm telling you, I'm tired of dealing with it. And, as many of the skills that I have, I'm having a difficult time. But I also talk to people that I know love and care about me. And I talk to my kids, especially talk to your kids about this situation. Because a lot of kids right now are afraid their parents are going to die, get the virus and die. I mean, our daughter said that, I'm worried that one of you is going to get sick and die. And, we just talked with them and said, here's what, if one of us does get sick, the likelihood of us dying is probably low. However, one of us could pass away. However, if that happens, we'll take it as it comes and we'll figure out how we do it, just like we get through other things. I think not talking about it scares our kids and even keeps it inside of us, because when we do talk about it, whether it's with our kids or a friend, we're sharing a part of ourselves and our vulnerability, and it feels good, because I guarantee you your friend or someone else is having those same questions and they just don't want to take that first thing because then they seem vulnerable. But this is a good time to share a part of yourself and to be vulnerable. And I keep using those terms a lot because it's very empowering to do so. It's scary for us. It's scary for someone to say, I need help or I'm afraid. Not too many people are comfortable saying, I'm afraid, right? And you need to. And that shows a piece of vulnerability, but it's also a starting point for someone to say, damn it, I'm afraid too. This really sucks. And then you start having a talk. And by the end of that, you're like, I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one that's afraid or worried about my kids getting sick or a loved one. Or, that's why I shared that story. I'm still frightened. If my daughter had to go into the hospital and I couldn't be with her, that scares the hell out of me. But you know what? At the end of the day, at least I can talk about it. And if it happens, we'll deal with it when it comes. And maybe if that happens, I have to be on a phone with her live videoing. Is that the same as being there and it's going to rip my heart out? Yes. But at least it's what I can do at the time. But until that happens, don't try to predict or think this is going to happen. That's what gets people very anxious is, well, what about if this happens? What about this happens? What about, and I say, I borrow something from just one day at a time. I can only control what I can control. I can't control the pandemic. I can't control the schools closing. I can't control whether college football is playing. So why worry about those things? Only worry about the things that you're in immediate control of. Getting up, taking care of yourself, practicing self-care, and taking care of your loved ones. Those are the things you can intentionally do. All the other stuff, there's 2 hurricanes or whatever in the Gulf right now. I can't control whether they hit those. Am I worried about them? No, they're on my mind that they could come here, but I need to worry about making dinner tonight for the kids, or what am I doing tomorrow for work? Those are things that I can control. So I tell people to just give up some of that control of things you can't and stop worrying about them.
That's definitely something that's definitely something that's good. I was just reading this quote, and we're going to end with this. It says, "I've chosen to perceive hard life experiences as spiritual assignments for growth and for healing." That's Gabrielle Bernstein. So y'all, we want to thank Dr. Patrick Bornick, for giving us his time on today. Y'all, he definitely dropped some nuggets on us that I believe we all can use. He's also given us all a website. And y'all, I'm going to probably be using their website to kind of, pick around and to kind of, deal with it. I come home sometimes and I just sit in my lazy boy, turn on the TV, and just probably I'll turn on the TV and then end up playing Candy Crush on my phone. But I believe that we can do some other things that are probably be more mind stimulating than those other things. And Tulane, and he himself and some other people at Tulane have developed something great. So y'all, we thank you for his time. We're probably going to try to get him to come back next week along with Dr. Deidre Hayes, because we're going to finish this conversation, because I believe that this conversation is definitely needed. I think he has given us some great tools and some nuggets to help us lift that stigma, take the cover off of what mental health is or mental issues is. So, Dr. Bornick, we thank you again on tonight for that. Each and every person that logged in, that shared, that liked, that tagged, that invited, I thank all of you. Until next week, you all have a great night. You guys be blessed.